week's episode of Dragon Ball Super! Beerus, the god of destruction, decides without the luscious allure of pudding that he's going to destroy the Earth. But first, he's gonna run into some major opposition in the forms of Majin Buu, Gotenks, Piccolo, Tien Shenhan, Android 18, freaking Gohan, and of course, the build-up to the epic confrontation between Vegeta and Beerus. Woo! Lord, I do have the vapors. This week's episode was badass, and it totally felt like a classic episode of Dragon Ball Z. It was action all over your face from beginning to end, and there were so many great fight scenes which involved a lot of the side characters. But before I talk about some of the action scenes this week, I want to talk about some small details which I thought were really awesome. First and foremost, Dende. He's actually Kami, the god of Earth. And because of this, he actually recognizes that Beerus has a godlike ki, and he's never felt anything like it before, and he is totally freaked the hell out. This week's episode also featured just another cringe-inducing Yamcha scene, which was so incredibly funny. So there's this one scene where all of the Z fighters have been defeated by Beerus, really easily, by the way, and they're basically telling Krillin that you need to go out there and fight just like your friends, but he has to stay there and watch his daughter Marin. That's when Yamcha comes over and he's like, look, Krillin, you go out and fight Beerus, I'll just stay here and watch your daughter. Yamcha, grow a frickin' pair. I'm not saying the Wolfang Fist would do anything against Beerus, but at least he would be a frickin' man. Alright, let's talk about the badassery of this week's episode. First and foremost, Majin Buu. I love his character, I love how expressive he is and how ridiculous and over the top he's always been. But in this week's episode, it almost seems like we were going back to the Majin Buu arc with how destructive and how he just kept coming back. And this was very nice because it was incredibly different from Battle of Gods, where Majin Buu is just basically taken out in about 2 hits. That's about it. But in this week's episode, Majin Buu just keeps on coming back and fighting against Beerus, and it's not like he does anything too flashy or anything, basically just a lot of punching, but just the fact that he keeps fighting back is amazing. No other fighter is trying to do that. And Beerus just completely destroys him, just dodging all of his attacks, looking all swift and badass, kicking him right into the ship. There's even a scene towards the end of the episode where Gohan decides he's gonna fight against Beerus, and as soon as he flies towards him, Beerus just grabs Majin Buu and slams him right into Gohan, and that is the only thing he needs to do to actually defeat Gohan. 1 hit from Majin Buu. That's it! This week's episode also got to see the return of the fusion dance. That's right, my friends. Trunks and Goten become Gotenks. And I am a little disappointed that they didn't decide to do anything Super Saiyan 3 style, but really, Beerus just treats him like a child. And that's a really important detail, because Gotenks, even in that form, is pretty freaking powerful, but Beerus isn't even doing anything really all that strong and physical to him. There's a scene where he starts to reprimand him by grabbing his arm and repeatedly slapping it until it turns big and bulbous and red, and then he just throws him against the ship, and that's the end of Gotenks. One scene that felt incredibly classic this week was that one where Piccolo, Android 18, and Tien decided to team up against Beerus, and they just throw their punches and kicks at him left and right, but it doesn't matter. Beerus literally just powers up once and blasts them all away. They can't even handle his shit. And this leads us to what could quite possibly be the most epic anime slap of all time. And there have been some amazing anime slaps. Just look up frickin' Bright Noah from Mobile Suit Gundam if you want to know what I mean. But this week's episode, of course, featured the big scene from Battle of Gods, where it seems like Vegeta is about to be killed, and then Bulma decides to just casually walk up to Beerus and slap him in the face. Now, in the movie, it's just one swift little slap, one little chop, that's about it. In this week's episode, there is build-up to this amazing slap, which is featured from multiple angles as Bulma falls over and gets knocked out. This is probably the most damage that Bulma has ever suffered in the series, and when Vegeta sees this, he cannot control his shit. In the movie, it's like an instantaneous transformation. Right here, it's just this slow, boiling, amazing buildup to when he just erupts with anger and goes into a Super Saiyan form, and his eyes are just completely white when he does this. You can see the crackling of the lightning from Super Saiyan 2, and he's getting ready to have an amazing battle with Beerus. I really hope they handle it well in the next episode, although if you look at the preview, you kind of have an idea of where things are going to go, because spoiler alert, it looks like Goku is going to be arriving. So what's the rundown on this week's episode of Dragon Ball Super? That's what I'm talking about. This is the more of the stuff that I want to see. I'm really glad that they got a lot of the different fighters involved in this week's episode because we got a lot of action scenes out of this one, a lot of mileage from this, and there were some really surprising scenes. Aside from the amazing action, there's also still a little bit of room for humor in this week's episode. I think the character of Whis is amazingly infectious and funny, especially because while all of this amazing shit is going on around him, the only thing he cares about is sushi, and he is so obsessed and happy about it that it just puts a big smile on your face. And it also makes you realize, especially if you watch Battle of Gods, that you're like, wow, this guy is the most powerful being in the universe? Speaking of the Gods of Destruction and their attendants, I'm really curious as to when Champa and his attendant are going to show up, because they've already made multiple appearances in the manga version of Dragon Ball Super, which are very different from what I'm actually seeing in the anime adaptation. They seem to be completely different in terms of what they're doing in the action scenes, but the overall story is still pretty much the same. That being said, I still really love the way they're doing things, especially in this week's episode, especially that big Vegeta transformation at the end. That was just badass, especially how all of his power was just blowing everything away. Totally just brought back memories of old school Dragon Ball. Not to mention, I love the soundtrack in this series. It's real subtle and you barely even hear it. They used it to great effect at the end of this week's episode when Vegeta goes through his transformation. It's the same music that was actually used when Goku was fighting against Beerus. I just think it sounds really cool and adds a lot to these badass martial arts fights. Otherwise, that's all I have to say about this week's episode. Just a lot of really cool action, and just how incredibly powerful Beerus is. He's not even breaking a sweat. He hasn't even unleashed anything that we could consider real power from this character yet, and frankly, that's quite disturbing. It's been a long time that we've seen a character in Dragon Ball who's just that absurdly powerful. So, great episode right here, pretty good animation and artwork, lots of great action, lots of fan-favorite characters, frickin' Yamcha acting like a little bitch, Beerus being all badass. This was a very, very fun episode of Dragon Ball Super, and that's why I'm gonna give it a 5 out of 5. That's right, my friends, check it out, it was pretty freaking awesome. So I want to hear from you guys. What did you think about this week's episode of Dragon Ball Super? Did you have a favorite action scene, a favorite character who showed up? What do you want to see from the future of the series? Please tell me in the comments section below. Thank you guys for watching my review. Make sure to like it, share it with your friends, and subscribe to the channel. You guys should also check out our weekly podcast show, The Powerful Nerdcast. Thank you guys again for watching, and as always, stay dandy, baby!